The warning and the mistake. The Chamber of Voices stood as the most magnificent structure in the known galaxy, carved from a single crystalline asteroid. It floated in neutral space between the territories of 1,000 different civilizations. Inside its vast halls, representatives from across the stars gathered to discuss matters that affected all sentient life. Today, the chamber held more beings than it had in centuries. At the center of the Great Hall stood Seer Cathara, a member of the ancient Mindari race. Her species had evolved beyond physical needs millennia ago, existing as beings of pure thought wrapped in shimmering energy fields. The Mindari were revered throughout the galaxy for their ability to perceive threads of probability, to see futures that had not yet come to pass. When a Mindari seer called for an emergency session of the Galactic Assembly, every species answered. Cathara's voice resonated directly in the minds of all present, bypassing the need for crude translation devices. She spoke with urgency that made even the oldest civilizations pay attention. Her words carried weight because Mindari seers did not see possibilities or maybes. They saw certainties, futures that would unfold unless specific actions were taken to prevent them. I have witnessed the emergence of a new species, Cathara began, her energy field pulsing with concern. They call themselves humans. They inhabit a world named Earth in a solar system unremarkable in every measurable way. Their sun is ordinary. Their planet holds no rare resources. Their technology is primitive by our standards. They have only recently ventured beyond their own moon. Ambassador Threll of the peaceful Orvani Collective shifted in his seat. His species valued knowledge and careful study above all else. They had welcomed dozens of emerging civilizations into the galactic community, with patience and wisdom. If they are so primitive, honored seer, why do you bring them to our attention? We have protocols for first contact with developing species. Surely they pose no immediate concern. Cathara's energy field dimmed, taking on colors that the translation matrices struggled to interpret. Sadness mixed with dread. I do not bring warning of what they are, Ambassador. I bring warning of what they will become if you make one critical mistake. She paused, and the silence in the chamber became absolute. Humans possess a trait that makes them unlike any species we have encountered. They form bonds with those they consider their own that transcend logic or self-preservation. If you harm their people without cause, if you strike them first, they will pursue you across the galaxy. They will sacrifice everything. They will turn their entire civilization into a weapon, and they will never ever stop. Grand Marshal Vexthor of the Talvon Dominion rose from his seat. The Talvon were a warrior race, tall and powerfully built, with forearms that ended in clawed hands. Their empire had expanded through military conquest for 3,000 years. They controlled 74 worlds and ruled through a philosophy of preemptive strength. Vexthor's scarred carapace told the story of hundreds of battles won through superior force and tactical brilliance. Honored seer. Vexthor's voice was hard and dismissive. The Talvon Dominion has faced countless species. We have defeated civilizations that possessed weapons beyond anything these humans could imagine. We have crushed resistance movements that spanned star systems. What makes you believe these primitives could threaten anyone, let alone pose a danger to established powers? Cathara turned her attention to the Grand Marshal, and those nearby saw her energy field flicker with something that looked like pity. Because I have seen your future, Grand Marshal Vexthor. I have seen you give the order to eliminate humanity before they can become a threat. I have seen human colonies burning under Talvon weapons. And I have seen what comes after. The chamber erupted in voices. Some species demanded more details. Others insisted on hearing the complete vision. The Talvon delegation shouted that no seer could predict the actions of the Dominion with certainty. Through it all, Cathara remained silent, waiting for the chaos to subside. High Counselor Mara of the Wisdom Seekers finally restored order. Her species lived for 500 years and valued careful deliberation above all things. Seer Cathara, you must help us understand. If humans are primitive, how can they possibly threaten an empire like the Talvon Dominion? What weapon do they possess that we should fear? They possess memory, Cathara replied simply. Humans do not forget wrongs committed against them. They teach their children about injustices that occurred generations before. They carry grievances across centuries. Most species in this chamber would fight for resources, for territory, for survival. Humans will fight for something far more dangerous. They will fight for justice, for revenge, for the principle that innocence should not die without consequence. She turned back to Vexthor. In my vision, Grand Marshal, You decide that humanity's rapid development makes them a potential threat. You launch a preemptive strike against one of their research facilities. You destroy it completely, killing everyone present. You do this to demonstrate Talvon power and to eliminate what you perceive as a future rival. And what happens then? Vexthor demanded. Do these humans simply accept their fate? Do they surrender to superior force as any logical species would? No. Cathera's voice became quieter, sadder. They declare war. Not for territory, not for resources, simply because you killed their people without cause. And in my vision, 23 years after your attack, I see Talvon cities burning. I see your fleet shattered. I see your empire reduced to your homeworld and 3 colony systems. I see your species broken not by superior weapons, but by an enemy that refused to stop, refused to negotiate, refused to forgive. The Talvon delegation erupted in outrage. Vexthor's forearms gestured dismissively. This is fantasy. The Talvon Dominion has never been defeated. We have faced species with technology superior to ours and prevailed through discipline and tactics. These humans have barely left their own planet. Your vision must be flawed, Seer. Perhaps age has clouded your sight. Cathera's energy field flared brightly, silencing the Grand Marshal. I am 3,000 years old, Vexthor. I have seen the rise and fall of a dozen civilizations. My visions have prevented 6 major wars and saved billions of lives. I tell you now with absolute certainty, if you strike humanity first, if you kill their people without provocation, you will create an enemy that will destroy your empire. Not because they are stronger, but because they will never stop pursuing you. Ambassador Threll stood again, his voice measured and calm. Honored Seer, if your vision is certain, then surely we can prevent it. We simply ensure that no one attacks humanity without cause. We establish protocols for first contact. We protect their development. I hope you are correct, Ambassador, Cathera replied. I have delivered my warning. What you do with it is beyond my ability to influence. I can only tell you what I have seen. I can only hope that wisdom prevails over pride. The session ended in disorder. Most species agreed to establish peaceful first contact protocols with humanity. The wisdom seekers volunteered to monitor human development and ensure they were protected during their vulnerable early stages. Ambassador Threll personally filed reports recommending extreme caution in any dealings with Earth and its colonies. But Grand Marshal Vexthor returned to Talvon space convinced that the seer had been wrong. The Talvon Military Council analyzed the vision and concluded it was impossible. A species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel could not threaten an empire that had perfected warfare over 3 millennia. The seer must have misinterpreted what she had seen, or perhaps her abilities had finally begun to fail with age. 5 years passed. Humanity continued its expansion into space. They established research stations in nearby star systems. They sent exploration vessels to map the local stellar neighborhood. They developed better engines, better computers, better materials. Their progress was remarkable but not unprecedented. Many species had advanced quickly once they achieved certain technological breakthroughs. The Talvon Dominion watched with growing concern. Human exploration was bringing them closer to Talvon borders. Human research stations were being established in systems that the Dominion considered strategically important. Human ships, though small and limited, were venturing into regions where Talvon influence had been unchallenged for centuries. Grand Marshal Vexthor called a meeting of the Dominion War Council in the Fortified Command Center on Talvon Prime. The massive chamber was lined with tactical displays showing the positions of Talvon fleets and the locations of potential threats. Dozens of military commanders gathered, their attention focused on a 3-dimensional map showing human expansion. The humans grow bolder, Vexthor began, his voice echoing through the chamber. 5 years ago, they had 1 research station beyond their home system. Today they have 12. They send ships into regions bordering our territory. They make contact with minor species that fall under our protection. If we allow this expansion to continue, in another 5 years they will be a legitimate power in this region. Commander Ralph, one of Vexthor's most trusted officers, spoke up. Grand Marshal, the humans have approached us through diplomatic channels. They request dialogue. They express interest in trade agreements and cultural exchange. They show no hostile intent. They show no hostile intent yet, Vexthor corrected. Every empire that ever threatened the Dominion began with peaceful overtures. The The Korvax were peaceful traders before they became our greatest rivals. The Ilthari spoke of friendship before they tried to restrict our expansion. Peace is a mask worn by the weak until they become strong enough to challenge us. But the Seer's warning, another commander ventured. She specifically said that attacking them first would. The Seer was wrong, Vexthor interrupted sharply. Look at them. They have 47 ships capable of interstellar travel. We have 4,000. Their largest research station houses 800 people. Our smallest military outpost houses 10,000 soldiers. Their weapons are primitive projectile and energy weapons. Our plasma cannons can crack planets. There is no scenario where they pose a threat to us. He activated a specific display showing a human facility. This is Kepler Station, their newest research outpost. It orbits a gas giant in a system they call Tau Ceti. 300 scientists and their families live there. They study stellar phenomena and conduct biological research. It is completely undefended except for some basic meteor defense systems. The chamber grew quiet as the commanders understood what Vexthor was proposing. We will eliminate Kepler Station, the Grand Marshal continued. Completely. Totally. We will leave no survivors. We will broadcast our action across all human frequencies. The message will be simple. Humanity has expanded too close to Talvon territory. This is the consequence. They will have one choice. Withdraw to their home system and accept Talvon authority, or face the complete destruction of their species. Grand Marshal, Commander Rolth said carefully, if the Seer's vision was accurate, this action will. The Seer's vision was the fantasy of an ancient mind losing its grip on reality, Vexthor declared. We make our own future through strength and decisive action. The humans will learn what every species in this region has learned. The Talvon Dominion does not tolerate potential rivals. We eliminate threats before they grow. That is how we have survived for 3,000 years. That is how we will survive for 3,000 more. The order was given. 3 weeks later, a Talvon battle group emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Tau Ceti system. 12 warships, each carrying enough firepower to devastate continents, moved toward Kepler Station with practiced precision. The station's automated systems detected the approaching fleet and sent urgent messages on all human channels. Researchers scrambled to understand what was happening. They attempted to communicate with the Talvon ships, requesting clarification, asking for dialogue, pleading for time to evacuate civilians. The Talvon fleet commander, following Grand Marshal Vexthor's explicit orders, responded with a single message broadcast on all human frequencies. Kepler Station has been designated for elimination. Humanity has expanded into regions under Talvon protection without authorization. This facility will be destroyed completely as a demonstration of the consequences of unauthorized expansion. You have 30 minutes to transmit any final messages. The humans did not understand. They broadcast back frantically, explaining that they had no knowledge of Talvon territorial claims, that their presence was for scientific research only, that they meant no harm. They begged for mercy. They pleaded for the lives of the children aboard the station. They offered to evacuate immediately if given time. The Talvon fleet waited exactly 30 minutes. Then they opened fire. The bombardment was methodical and thorough. Talvon plasma weapons struck Kepler Station in carefully calculated patterns. The research modules exploded first, killing the scientists instantly. Then the habitation rings where families had been scrambling to reach escape pods that did not exist. The agricultural sections, the medical facilities, the schools where human children had been learning about the wonders of space. It took 42 minutes to completely destroy Kepler Station. 317 humans died. Scientists who had dedicated their lives to understanding the universe. Engineers who had built humanity's first steps into deep space. Teachers, doctors, and 63 children. The youngest only 3 years old. One small transport ship managed to escape before the attack began. It carried 18 people who had been conducting research on the gas giant's moons. They watched from a distance as their home, their friends, their families were methodically annihilated. They recorded everything. The Talvon fleet commander allowed the transport to escape. Grand Marshal Vexthor had specifically ordered that survivors be permitted to return to Earth. Someone needed to deliver the message. Someone needed to explain to humanity what happened when they expanded without Talvon permission. The transport ship arrived at Earth 6 days later. The recordings were broadcast on every human network. Billions of humans watched Kepler Station die. They saw the plasma strikes hitting the habitation modules. They heard the final transmissions from people who knew they were about to die. They watched children's schools exploding in flashes of light that would haunt humanity's collective memory forever. The Talvon message followed. It was translated into human languages by their computers, delivered in the cold, precise tones of military efficiency. Humanity has expanded without authorization into regions protected by the Talvon Dominion. Kepler Station has been eliminated to demonstrate the consequences of such actions. Humanity will withdraw all presence beyond its home system and accept Talvon authority. You have 7 standard days to respond. Failure to comply will result in the elimination of all human presence in space. The galaxy watched and waited. Most species assumed humanity would comply. The alternative was extinction. A species that had barely left its home system could not challenge an empire that commanded 4,000 warships. Logic dictated surrender. For 3 days, Earth was silent. No transmissions, no responses. The entire human civilization seemed to hold its breath. On the 4th day, a message broadcast from Earth on all frequencies in every known galactic language. It was delivered by an elderly human woman named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the Director General of the United Earth Government. Her face was composed, but her eyes held something that made several alien observers deeply uncomfortable, something cold, something absolute. To the Talvon Dominion and to all civilizations observing, 317 human beings were murdered at Kepler Station. Scientists, families, 63 children. They were killed without warning, without provocation, without mercy. You did this to demonstrate your power and to force our submission. She paused. In that pause, something fundamental shifted across human space. We decline. We will not submit to the Talvon Dominion. We will not withdraw from space. We will not bow to those who murder children to make political statements. Another pause. Longer this time. You wanted to demonstrate your power. You have succeeded. You have shown us exactly what you are. You have shown us what the galaxy tolerates. You have shown us that might makes right and that the strong can kill the weak without consequence. Her voice grew harder, colder. Thank you for the lesson. We will remember it. You have 7 days to evacuate your border territories and prepare your defenses, because we are coming, not to negotiate, not to trade, not to submit. We are coming to ensure that what you did to Kepler Station never happens to anyone, anywhere, ever again. The transmission ended with a final statement that would echo across the galaxy for decades. You killed our children to show us your strength. Now we will show you ours. We dare you to stop us. In the Talvon Command Center, Grand Marshal Vexthor watched the transmission with growing anger. These primitives dared to threaten the Dominion? He immediately ordered additional fleets to prepare for the complete elimination of humanity. In the Chamber of Voices, Seer Cathera watched the same transmission. Her energy field dimmed to almost nothing. She had tried to warn them. She had seen this exact moment in her vision 3 years ago. Now it was beginning, and nothing could stop what was coming. The galaxy watched as humanity disappeared. Within weeks, every human presence outside Earth itself went dark. Colonies evacuated. Stations abandoned. Ships recalled. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from space. The Talvon Dominion declared victory. The humans had learned their lesson and retreated in fear. Grand Marshal Vexthor was celebrated as a brilliant strategist who had eliminated a potential threat without risking a single Talvon life. But in hidden shipyards scattered across a dozen star systems, in facilities buried deep beneath Earth's surface, in stations concealed in asteroid fields and nebulae, humanity was building. They were not fleeing. They were preparing, and in 5 years, they would return to teach the Talvon Dominion the most expensive lesson any civilization had ever learned. Never strike first against an enemy who will never stop coming for you. The Reckoning and the Legacy 5 years of silence. 5 years during which the Talvon Dominion grew comfortable with their victory. 5 years during which the galaxy began to forget about the small species that had vanished after one devastating blow. Grand Marshal Vexthor received commendations for his decisive action. Military academies taught the Kepler Station strike as an example of how to eliminate threats efficiently. The Talvon Dominion continued its expansion, claiming systems that humanity had abandoned. They established military outposts in regions where human research stations once floated. They grew complacent, believing that their demonstration of power had permanently solved the human problem. Then the attacks began. A Talvon supply convoy, carrying critical resources for 3 colony worlds, simply vanished. 27 cargo vessels disappeared without distress calls, without debris, without any indication of what had happened. The Dominion sent a battle group to investigate. That battle group also vanished. 40 ships and 8,000 Talvon soldiers gone as if they had never existed. More incidents followed with increasing frequency. Mining facilities on the edges of Talvon territory went silent. Entire garrisons stopped responding to communications. Trade routes became death traps where Talvon ships entered and never emerged. The Dominion military responded with overwhelming force, sending entire fleets to secure threatened regions. But the enemy never appeared. They struck from nowhere, destroyed their targets, and vanished before Talvon reinforcements arrived. Survivors, when there were any, reported ships appearing without warning, vessels painted black that seemed to absorb light itself, weapons that tore through Talvon shields as if they were not there. The attackers never stayed to fight. They inflicted maximum damage and disappeared into the darkness of space. It took the Talvon 2 years to confirm what they already suspected. Humanity had returned, but these were not the same frightened primitives who had fled 5 years earlier. These humans had transformed themselves into something the galaxy had never encountered. In those 5 years of silence, humanity had built an armada, using technology stolen from the Talvon during raids, improved upon and perfected. They had constructed thousands of warships. They had trained entire generations of soldiers who knew nothing but preparation for war. They had converted their entire civilization into a weapon with one single purpose: the destruction of the Talvon Dominion. Human tactics were unlike anything the Talvon had faced. They did not fight for territory or resources. They fought only to destroy. Every engagement was carefully calculated to inflict maximum casualties with minimum risk. They used kinetic weapons, simple masses accelerated to near light speed that struck with the force of nuclear explosions. They employed biological agents, specifically engineered to attack Talvon physiology, diseases that spread through Talvon populations before anyone realized they were under attack. But perhaps most devastating was their psychological warfare. Human ships broadcast footage of Kepler Station's destruction continuously on all Talvon frequencies. Every Talvon citizen, every soldier, every commander was forced to see the children dying, to hear the final screams of the innocent. The message was clear and repeated endlessly. This is why we are here. This is what you did. This is why we will never stop. Grand Marshal Vexthor watched his empire crumble. Territory was lost. Colonies were abandoned as their populations fled toward the safety of the core worlds. Allied species broke their treaties with the Talvon, terrified of becoming targets of human vengeance. The Dominion military, once the most feared force in the region, found itself stretched impossibly thin, trying to defend against attacks that came from every direction. What disturbed Vexthor most was not the human military capability, though that was formidable. It was their absolute refusal to negotiate. Captured human soldiers would not surrender even facing certain death. Many chose to end their own lives rather than provide information. Those who were taken alive would not speak, would not bargain, would not beg. They would simply look their captors in the eye and recite names. 317 names. Every human soldier had memorized the complete list of those who died at Kepler Station. 10 years into the war, the Talvon Dominion attempted diplomacy. They sent envoys through neutral channels, offering to discuss peace terms. The humans responded by destroying the courier ship and broadcasting the Kepler Station footage again. 15 years into the war, the Dominion offered reparations, offered to accept blame, offered to surrender territory. The human response was the same. Footage of children dying and a simple message: not enough. Other species tried to intervene. Ambassador Threll of the Orvani Collective pleaded with both sides to find a peaceful solution. The wisdom seekers offered to mediate. Even species that had no connection to the conflict volunteered to help negotiate an end to the bloodshed. The Talvon, for the first time in their 3,000-year history, indicated they would accept almost any terms for peace. The humans refused every offer. Their response, delivered by Fleet Admiral James Chen, was chillingly simple. You killed our people to demonstrate your power. We will demonstrate ours. There will be no negotiation. There will be no surrender. There will be no forgiveness. We will continue until the Talvan Dominion understands the cost of what they did. That is not a threat. That is a promise we will keep. 20 years after Kepler Station, the tide of war had turned completely. Human ships were now superior to Talvan vessels in speed, firepower, and defensive capabilities. Human tactics had evolved to counter every Talvan strategy. Human intelligence, networks had infiltrated every level of Talvan society. The hunters had become the hunted. Other species began providing covert assistance to humanity, not because they loved humans, but because they feared what would happen if the Talvan won. If the Dominion could survive after murdering innocents, what message would that send? The Orvani provided intelligence about Talvan fleet movements. The Korvax shared their advanced computational technology. The Ilthari allowed human ships to use their systems as staging areas. No one formally allied with humanity, but everyone quietly helped them because the alternative was unthinkable. Grand Marshal Vexthor, now old and weary, finally accessed the Galactic Assembly archives. He found the recording of Seer Cathera's warning from 25 years earlier. He watched the ancient Mindari prophet speak, heard her describe exactly what would happen if the Talvan struck first. Every detail had come to pass precisely as she had foreseen. I have seen Talvan cities burning, the recording said. I have seen your fleets shattered. I have seen your empire reduced to your homeworld and 3 colonies. I have seen your species, broken not by superior weapons but by an enemy that refused to stop. Vexler closed his 4 eyes. The seer had been right about everything. He had been warned explicitly and clearly, and he had dismissed it as impossible. Now his civilization was paying the price for his arrogance. The final assault on Talvan Prime began 23 years after Kepler Station. Human fleets, thousands strong, emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation around the Talvan homeworld. They came not as raiders or guerrillas, but as a professional military force executing a carefully planned operation. They had learned everything the Talvan could teach about warfare, and they had surpassed their teachers. Grand Marshal Vexthor stood in the command center, watching the displays as human ships took up positions. There were too many to count. His fleet, once numbering in the thousands, was now reduced to fewer than 200 operational vessels. He knew the battle was lost before it began. A transmission came through on all Talvan frequencies. Fleet Admiral Chen, the grandson of a scientist who had died at Kepler Station, spoke with calm finality. Grand Marshal Vexthor, 23 years ago you sent a fleet to destroy Kepler Station. You killed 317 people to demonstrate Talvan power. You murdered 63 children to force our submission. Now we have come to your world, not to demonstrate power, not to prove anything. We have come because you gave us no choice. He paused, and in that pause, Vexthor felt true fear for the first time in his long military career. We could destroy your world as you destroyed our station. We could kill billions of your people, as you killed hundreds of ours. We could demonstrate that we learned your lessons about the strong eliminating the weak. But we will not. Do you know why? Another pause. Because we are not you. Your world will not burn. Your people will not die. You will live and remember. You will teach your children what happens when someone makes the mistake of striking first against an enemy who will never forget. That is the only mercy you will receive. The occupation of Talvan Prime lasted 12 years. During that time, humanity demonstrated restraint that shocked the galactic community. They did not enslave the Talvan population. They did not strip the world of resources. They did not impose cruel governance or demand impossible tribute. Instead, they educated. Every Talvan child attended programs where they learned about Kepler Station in detail. They saw the recordings from beginning to end. They heard testimonies from the 18 survivors who had watched from the transport ship. They learned the names and stories of all 317 victims. They were taught to understand truly and completely what their empire had done and why it was wrong. The goal was not humiliation, it was comprehension. Humanity needed the Talvan to understand on a fundamental level why the war had happened, and why it could never happen again. The Talvon military was disbanded completely. Their warships were decommissioned and converted into civilian vessels or recycled for materials. Their weapons factories were repurposed to produce agricultural equipment and medical supplies. The empire that had controlled 74 worlds was reduced to its homeworld and 3 nearby colonies. Grand Marshal Vexthor was not executed, though many humans demanded it. Instead, he was brought before the Galactic Assembly to stand trial. The proceedings lasted 8 months. Evidence was presented in exhaustive detail. The recordings from Kepler Station were played in their entirety. Survivors testified. Experts analyzed the attack and its aftermath. Vexthor was forced to sit and watch every moment, to see the consequences of his orders. At the end of the trial, he was given the opportunity to speak. He was an old warrior by then, his carapace dull, his forearms weak, but his mind remained sharp. He looked at the assembled representatives from 1,000 worlds and spoke with a clarity born of bitter understanding. I gave the order to destroy Kepler Station. I believed it was strategically necessary. I believed humanity posed a threat that needed to be eliminated before it grew. I was warned by Seer Cathara that striking first would lead to our destruction. I dismissed her warning as impossible fantasy. I was wrong. His voice carried through the chamber's translation systems, rendered into 1,000 languages simultaneously. I was wrong not because we lost the war, though we did lose. I was wrong because the war should never have happened. We killed innocents to demonstrate power. We murdered children to force submission, and we learned that some species will sacrifice everything for justice. The humans did not win because they were stronger, though they became strong. They won because we gave them a reason to never surrender. He looked directly at the human delegation, at Fleet Admiral Chen and the other officers who had spent decades pursuing his empire across the stars. I hope every species here learns from our mistake. Do not strike first. Do not kill innocents to show your strength, because if you do, you may face an enemy like humanity, an enemy that will turn their entire civilization into a weapon pointed at you, an enemy that will pursue you across decades and light years for justice. That is something no empire can survive. The Galactic Assembly sentenced Vexthor to life imprisonment. He would spend his remaining years in a human facility, surrounded by images and recordings from Kepler Station, seeing every day the faces of those who had died because of his orders. It was not revenge. It was education continued to its conclusion. 25 years after Kepler Station, humanity withdrew from Talvon Prime. They had accomplished their goal. The Talvon understood their mistake. The galaxy understood the consequences of unprovoked aggression. The message was unmistakable. Humanity would befriend anyone, trade with anyone, help anyone. But if you killed their people without cause, they would come for you. And they would not stop until justice was done. Humanity requested a seat on the Galactic Assembly. There was no debate. The motion passed with unanimous support. The species that had been unknown primitives 25 years earlier now held one of the most influential positions in galactic politics. They had earned it through blood, determination, and the terrible lesson they had taught the galaxy. The human representative was a woman named Ambassador Lisa Torres. She had been born on Earth during the evacuation, had grown up in the hidden colonies, and had served in the final assault on Talvon Prime. She was shaped by the war but not consumed by it. Her first act as council representative was to propose new legislation. The Kepler Accords, as they became known, established strict protections for emerging civilizations. No species could launch preemptive strikes against another without clear evidence of imminent aggression. Violations would result in immediate sanctions and potential military intervention, led by a coalition of assembly members. The Accords also created a protection framework for young civilizations, ensuring they would have time and space to develop without fear of destruction from more advanced species. The galaxy accepted the Kepler Accords without opposition. No one wanted to become the next Talvon Dominion. No one wanted to face an enemy that would pursue them across decades for justice. The humans had proven something fundamental about themselves. They could be the best friends or the worst enemies any species could have. The choice was entirely up to those who encountered them, but humanity never forgot Kepler Station. Every human child learned about it. Every military officer studied it. Every diplomat carried its memory. The 317 names were inscribed on a memorial built in orbit around the ruins of the station. The memorial was massive. visible from space, a permanent reminder of the cost of unprovoked aggression. Seer Cathera, still alive after all those years, visited Earth 30 years after the war. She met with Ambassador Torres and other human leaders. They walked together through museums dedicated to the conflict, looking at artifacts and recordings. When they reached the memorial chamber, where all 317 names were displayed in letters 3 meters tall, Cathera's energy field flickered with colors that translated to profound sadness. "The prophet tried to warn us," she said quietly. "I delivered his vision myself. I told Grand Marshal Vexthor exactly what would happen. He did not believe. He thought strength alone determined outcomes." Ambassador Torres looked at the names surrounding them, each one a person who had died simply because they had expanded into space without permission from an empire that feared potential rivals. The seer understood something about us that we did not fully understand ourselves, Torres replied. "We do not fight for territory or resources. We fight for memory, for justice, for the principle that innocents should not be killed to make political points. Once you give us that reason, once you make us your enemy through your own actions, we become inevitable. We will come no matter the cost, no matter how long it takes." Cathera nodded slowly. "The galaxy has learned that lesson. I only wish it had not required so much suffering." "So do we," Torres said softly. "We would have been your friends. We would have joined the galactic community peacefully. We wanted to explore, to learn, to share." The Talvan made a choice, and that choice shaped everything that followed. The years passed. The Kepler Accords held. Conflicts that might once have led to preemptive strikes were now resolved through diplomacy and assembly intervention. The threat of human enforcement was rarely spoken of directly, but it was always present. When a minor empire attempted to conquer a primitive species 12 years after the war, humanity responded immediately. They sent fleets. The aggressor empire surrendered within weeks and agreed to reparations. The primitive species was protected and given time to develop. The message was reinforced. Humanity would enforce the accords they had created, regardless of who violated them. Justice was not negotiable. 100 years after Kepler's station, the Talvan people held their own memorial ceremony. They had rebuilt their civilization slowly, carefully under human oversight that gradually decreased as they proved their commitment to peace. Young Talvan, who had never known the Dominion, attended schools alongside other species. They learned about the war not as a glorious conflict, but as a catastrophic mistake that had cost millions of lives. A Talvan delegation traveled to Kepler Station's ruins to pay respects. They were led by a young Talvan named Kelthir, the great-grandchild of a commander who had questioned Vexthor's original decision. Kelthir stood on the surface of the dead world, looking at the scars that remained a century after the attack. "We cannot undo what was done," Kelthir said, speaking into a recorder that would broadcast his words across both Talvan and human space. "We cannot bring back those who died, but we can remember. We can teach our children. We can ensure that the mistake that destroyed our empire is never repeated." He placed a monument on the barren surface, a crystalline structure inscribed with all 317 names in both human and Talvan script. "We remember them, we honor them, and we thank them, because their deaths taught the galaxy a lesson that has prevented countless other tragedies. May their memory be eternal." The message reached Earth and was broadcast on every human network. Many humans wept, seeing that even former enemies could learn, could grow, could understand. It did not erase the pain, but it gave it meaning. Ambassador Torres, now elderly herself, watched the ceremony and felt something shift inside her. The war had defined her life, had shaped humanity's place in the galaxy. But perhaps finally its purpose was complete. The lesson had been learned. The galaxy was safer. The innocent were protected. That night she stood before the memorial one last time, looking at the 317 names. "We kept our promise," she whispered. "We made sure you did not die in vain. We made sure it could never happen again. Rest well." And across the galaxy, in chambers of government and halls of learning, in military academies and diplomatic schools, in every place where beings gathered to discuss the future, one lesson was taught above all others. Never strike first against those who will never forget, because some enemies will sacrifice everything for justice, and humanity had proven that such enemies cannot be defeated. They can only be prevented by never giving them a reason to become your enemy in the first place. The Kepler Accords stood as law. The memorial floated in silent orbit, and humanity watched the stars no longer as frightened newcomers, but as guardians ensuring that what had happened to their people would never happen to anyone else. The galaxy had learned, finally and completely, and the price of that education would never be forgotten.